Welcome to Her Path, the podcast for busy women looking for purpose, health, and happiness. This week, we are going to be exploring what is perfectionist or perfection, excuse me, and how this can affect your life and maybe what you could do to change your view on what is perfection. And I'd like to start with a definition that I got from Google. And it says that perfection is the condition, state, or quality of being free or as free as possible from all flaws or defects. And when I read this definition, I feel like, well, who is judging that flawless perfectionism? And I feel like perfection, just like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. And it's interesting to think about being a perfectionist and how that can be so self-deflating. And I think initially it's a thought that if things are perfect or I do things perfectly, others will be happy or others will approve of me. It's seeking other people's approval and feeling like you belong. But it is very um, selfish and putting things and people aside to focus on yourself. And we were just talking and I thought it was very fascinating. I know, Elise, that you are reading a book from Brene Brown,
Yes.
and it is called,
It's called The Gifts of Imperfection. So it's one of her older books. I'm rereading it to use it with a client. And it really does outline some very interesting thoughts about perfectionism. Um, Perfectionism, according to Brene Brown, is, in conflict with self-compassion, which I thought was so interesting, right? So when we are being perfectionists, we are holding ourselves to enormous responsibility and accountability and very high standards. And if we don't meet those standards, we are shaming ourselves, we're judging ourselves, we are beating ourselves up. And you can choose to have a perfectionist life or a life with self-compassion. And to me, it was such a profound way of thinking about it, because people have told me, oh, you're such a perfectionist, right? You're such a nerd. You always have to have everything just perfect. Um, but what is the burden that comes along with that for the person, right? And how much harder is your life if you're always being held to these standards that you put on yourself? Like nobody else is putting that on you. It's all for yourself. So yeah, I highly recommend that book. If this is a topic that resonates with our readers, um, it's so well written and it gives you so many different ways to think about how it's okay not to be a perfectionist.
I think being in the medical field and just in our educational system in general does us a disservice because we are already programmed to seek perfection, to get those hundreds, right? Get those 90s. It's got to be A's, A's, A's. It's got to be perfect so that you can get to the next level and progress to the next level. And that just sticks. You have to be almost perfect to be good enough, to be qualified enough,
Right.
to be able to advance, just to say, in life. But it gets to the point where it's paralyzing, really striving for perfection. And in simple, small things, like I have to write consult notes, for my patients. And it can be so time consuming to really work on making the perfect note to document perfectly. And it just leads to so much stress. It takes so much time that you take work home, and you can have a perfectly acceptable note without it being perfect. And it took me some time to be okay. And I think it was our mentor who I heard this comment from. It's okay to do B minus work. Just get it done. It's okay if it's a B minus. And for someone who's used to getting hundreds and 90s, whoa, a B minus. I don't know if I can do that. It just takes, some insight and just some practice, and to be able to be satisfied with something that in your mind isn't perfect, but is completely acceptable.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a great point. And I actually, if it's okay, I would like to read 2 passages from this book that get at exactly what you're saying. Perfectionist is not the same thing as striving to be your best, right? And I think in the medical world, we're always striving to be our best. Perfectionism is not about healthy achievement and growth. Perfectionism is a belief that if we live perfect, look perfect, act perfect, we can minimize or avoid the pain of blaming, judging, and shame. It's a shield. Perfectionism is a 20-ton shield that we lug around thinking it will protect us, when in fact, it's the thing that really prevents us from taking flight. It's stopping us from being seen.
Yeah, it could be paralyzing. I agree.
Yes. Yeah. And here's the other one that kind of goes along with that. Perfectionism is not self-improvement. Perfectionism is at its core about trying to earn approval and acceptance. Most perfectionists were raised being praised for achievement and performance, grades, manners, rule following, people pleasing, appearance, sports, etc. Somewhere along the way, we adopt this dangerous and debilitating belief system. I am what I accomplish and how well I accomplish it. Please perform perfect. Healthy striving is self-focused. How can I improve? Perfectionism is the other focused. What will they think? Right? That's a pretty mind-blowing way of thinking about it, that it's not helping us, that it's a shield, a very heavy, onerous shield, and it's not helping us improve. It's helping us, on how other people will think of us.
Thank you
Right,
for sharing
because
that, Elise.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
you
just
are vulnerable, right? When you're not perfect. Your
right,
flaws will come out, your
right.
blemishes, your secrets, those things that you want to hide, your insecurities. And that's not fun. To
Right,
feel
right.
vulnerable.
Mhm. Yeah, Nancy, what did you think of those definitions and insights?
I keep coming to the fact that, if I'm a patient and I'm having a surgery, I want it to go perfect. So I want the physician to be perfect or the surgeon to be perfect. And yet I'm okay with me not being perfect. So my mind is just kind of working this out here.
I thought that was interesting concept. What I gleaned from that is being a perfectionist is a coping mechanism to get people's approval and love and acceptance, and to protect them from feeling the uncomfortable feelings of rejection and failure. And thinking about our work that we do, we teach our clients how to feel all of the emotions that are available to us as humans. The good ones and the not so fun ones to feel, the uncomfortable, right? The 50-50. And so much of our time is spent avoiding feeling rejection, feeling like a failure, feeling anxious, feeling sad. We always want to feel the positive emotion. And so I just thought that very fascinating, that it's like a coping mechanism, almost like buffering, would you think?
Mhm.
And for those of you that don't know what buffering is, buffering, and please correct me, ladies, over my definition, but buffering is doing something, an activity that allows you to put the emotion that you're about to feel on hold for a little bit. It distracts you from feeling a certain way. And it usually it helps you just kind of push it away or numb it out or forget about it for a little bit, so you don't have to think about it and you don't have to process it. Some examples would be, um, I have some work I want to do, but I'd really want to check, my Facebook or Instagram account and see what's going on there. Or I want to work out, but I don't want to feel uncomfortable. And so I'm going to sit on the couch instead and watch Netflix, or a variety of other different things that you can do to avoid and not feel your emotions. Would you think that being a perfectionist could be a form of buffering?
I think it could, because you're like keeping all the busyness up. You're trying to do all these things to make a situation perfect that you're maybe not really dealing with what's at hand.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating thought. Like it took me a little bit to put those two together, because normally I would not think of perfectionism as a buffering mechanism. But if it does keep you from feeling vulnerable and feeling exposed, then
Was.
yeah, it probably is. It's an unconventional form of buffering. Like we think of buffering like eating too much to hide our feelings, or drinking, or some of those other things, but it's an unconventional way of buffering.
Buffering. And there's usually like
Fascinating.
a net negative consequence to buffering. With overeating, we gain weight. With, over drinking, we become dependent on alcohol, or have hangovers, or, act silly and not ourselves. And with other things, there's procrastination. And so with perfectionism, I wonder if there is a net negative that happens. But after you were reading, it sounds like it's exhausting. So there is a net negative of feeling exhausted, living, in blame and shame and judgment of yourself, and always being self-critical and never being good enough.
And it keeps you also from being productive in ways that you want to. For some people, for example, like for me, if I want to create a content, if I want to, write something, and you may not even be aware that it's actually happening, but it took me some practice to figure out how to do, just let it out, with all the grammar mistakes, with the spelling, with the ideas that don't flow, just get it all out there and then clean it up afterwards. And so I think, at least for me, my feeling that it has to come out exactly the way it needs to and be, perfect from the beginning, keeps me from doing anything at all. And I see that also in, trying to make, let's say, weight loss, trying to make a change. People go to the extremes and think it's got to be a perfect way of doing it. Every day I have to have this pre-planned meal, this structure, and I need to follow it perfectly every day. One day doesn't go as planned, that's it. It's not perfect anymore. Nothing's working. I might as well not do anything. And so it can definitely get in the way of our goals, and stumbling, making mistakes, not being perfect, not following a plan 100%. That's how we get our biggest gains. That's how we really learn how to improve, how to make things better. That sometimes perfection is not the actual goal. Sometimes it's the process, and maybe seeking that. I mean, I don't think there is anything wrong with seeking perfection, or striving for perfection, or striving for, that excellence, but I think it's the road in getting there that sometimes is where the biggest gains or the biggest advances come in.
Yeah, the journey, learning from the journey and not the outcome.
Yeah, and just putting your tennis shoes on, showing up to the gym or starting that walk, and maybe you only do a third of the workout, and then you stop. That's okay. Next time, maybe you'll do a little bit more. And maybe next time you'll do a little bit more. Or working on, the meal prepping and the grocery shopping. This week, maybe you had 3 of your planned meals. It's okay. It's a start. Over time, we start developing those muscles, those neural pathways, that way of thinking where it just becomes so much more fluid and so much more natural and so easier to follow a desired path than to being stuck in, it's not going the way I want. It's not exactly how it's supposed to be. I'm not getting the results that, that I was promised. So that's it. I'm not going to try
Right.
anymore. I'm going to stop because it's not perfect. It's not
It-
happening. I'm not getting the results. And then that's just inaction, and we get nothing from inaction.
It's either all or nothing with
We
perfectionism,
are
or we're
so
making,
all or nothing all the time.
right, versus making those little steps forward, the progress, right? What is
Right.
that statement? Progress, not perfection, right?
Exactly.
Making progress, we may fall, we may trip, we may stumble along the way, but we're always moving forward.
Right.
Yeah, it's celebrating the small wins along the way. Like just, you know, something that I don't remember where I heard it or where I read it, but just being 1% forward or trying to improve yourself or move more forward towards whatever goal it is you're after. Just 1%, it's just a teeny, just like it's not even a step, it's a half a step every day, and giving yourself credit for taking that forward step.
Mhm.
And eventually you will step backwards, you will fail, you'll fall off. And I think in that moment, that's where the self-compassion comes in instead of the perfectionism. And self-compassion will help you give you that momentum to dust yourself off, you know, hey, like how you would treat a friend if, they did something like they did a failure and they're being really hard on themselves. You're not going to, yeah, you really suck. You shouldn't have tried it anyway. And you might as well just go home. And you're not going to do that to your friend, right? You're going to
Never
pick,
say that.
no, you'll be their best cheerleader. And so we need to be our best cheerleaders to ourselves.
Talk to
And
ourselves as we would a child, right? We would
yeah,
never.
Oh,
absolutely.
yes. I'll tell you the story. So this weekend, Elisa, my 7-year-old, she's learning how to ride her bike without training wheels, and she's been doing She wanted to do the longer bike trail. So it does involve going through streets before getting to the trail. And on the trail, she, there was a sharp turn with a big post at the turn. We're like, okay, just look straight. Don't look at the pole. Okay, just look straight, and you will turn in that direction. And so what does she do? She goes straight into the pole and bam, crashes to the ground, crying, all the things like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? We're not. We were going to make it to the lake to feed the duckies. We were like halfway there. Do you want to stop? We can go home. It's okay. We can go home. I'm okay. I have the bread in my bag. I want to go feed the duckies. All right. We get back on the bike. Another down the road, there's a bridge. It's a little bit uphill. She's going up the hill. She wobbles on the bridge and bam, straight into the railing of the bridge. And her face goes into the railing this time. She falls, crying again, screaming. And like, oh my God, are you okay? Okay, she was fine. She did get scratches on her face. I'm like, all right, honey, it's okay. That was a hard hill, but you did great. You made it up the hill. Do you want to go back home? Or, the lake is right there. We can see it. And got back on her bike and we made it all the way back, all the way to the lake. The way back home was easier. She felt more confident. She made it all the way. We did have to have a few stops to rest, but not once did she want to stop or say, I want to go home, and it was hard. I mean, she was literally crying and she got scratches on herself. but she made it. And we went through this with the 3 other kids, so we know how painful, and we knew what to expect. But that's kind of like in life, when you are, striving for something, wanting to reach it, you're going to fall on your ass, you're going to fall on your face, you're going to get some cuts, you're going to get some bruises. But if you persevere and you keep trying, you'll eventually make it to that goal. But sometimes the way there isn't a straight, perfect, easy path.
Right. And look at the way you talk to your daughter, right? Now imagine if it was, if it was you and you smashed into that pole, would you talk to yourself as kindly as you did to your daughter? Or would be like,
Oh
"What are
no,
you
I would
being
quit.
an
I would
idiot?"
say,
Yeah.
I'm getting Uber. I'm getting
Yeah.
someone to come pick me up, take me home.
Right, right. So we have to learn how to talk to ourselves like we would a child. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is really good advice for all of us and for all of our listeners.
Yes.
Absolutely. Anything else that has come up for any of y'all that you'd like to share or brought you some insight or ahas? Okay. Well, I've really enjoyed this topic. It was very interesting, and something just popped into my mind that I used to say a lot. It's not mine. I've heard it from somewhere. And maybe it's famous. I don't know, but I love it. And I think I'm going to start saying this to myself again, but I'm perfectly imperfect. And until next week, I want to invite you all to be perfectly imperfect. And if this episode was helpful, if you found it fun or entertaining, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. And we'll see you next week. Bye. Hey, one more thing before we leave. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are certified professional coaches, but this broadcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice. Okay, thanks for listening. See you next week.